biggest perks of studying cannabis chemistry was learning that you don't have to settle for concentrates that you don't enjoy. If your concentrates taste weird, bad, or just boring, this video is going to show you how to fix it since not every dab can be a $60 gram. See, back when I was a bud tender, I noticed most of us shop on the budget shelf. And personally, I still find myself there today since honestly, most of the time, there's nothing wrong with the cheaper stuff. Today, I'm going to show you how I take a concentrate that I think is just okay and make it into something that I actually look forward to dabbing. And before people start popping off in the comment section, no, we're not trying to pretend we're alchemists here, turning lead into gold, or in this case, some budget sugar concentrates into 6-star hash. N- No one's pretending that this came from fire starting product, but we can be chemists, and that means that we aren't stuck with just bad tasting or boring extracts. So, before we start mixing things together, let's talk for a second about what we're actually doing here. Most people think terpenes are responsible for all of the smell and flavor in cannabis. And while they definitely play a huge role, they're just one piece of the puzzle. Research over the last few years has shown that cannabis aroma is actually much more complex. A series of white papers done by Abstracts Terpenes that eventually turned into peer-reviewed research showed that there are things like volatile sulfur compounds, cannaflavins, esters, indoles, and plenty of other compounds that all contribute to what the experience is when we open a jar and what actually makes a strain unique. That means that if we're just adding a few different terpenes, we're not going to totally recreate the profile of a freshly harvested plant or what's seen in the flower. And that's just one of the reasons why when I was working in extraction labs as a lab director, Abstracts was the terpene company I chose for things like flavoring vape carts. A little shout out here just because I think they deserve it. These guys do spend a lot of time and money in the lab actually researching this plant. And having done some cannabis related research myself, I know that's not a small task. But as a lab manager, I felt much more comfortable trusting that their flavor blends are going to be much more accurate and true to the plant, and also include those minor compounds that research showed actually makes the strain unique. As a consumer, I just fucking love the taste of their stuff. Getting back to this video though, you don't need to use their terps. There's plenty of other companies out there. And in fact, you actually could use natural flavorings if you wanted to. I mean, that's what the e-cig industry does. And there's no shortage of flavorings from companies like Flavor Art or the Flavor Apprentice if that's what you're aiming for. Fun fact, I was actually doing this sort of flavor formulation in the e-cig industry for a couple of years before I started studying cannabis and getting into the cannabis industry. Back in the day, I used to mix and sell my own e-liquid, and I'd spend hours just tweaking flavor percentages, formulating recipes until everything tasted just right. And really what we're doing here with this concentrate isn't really that different. You're taking a base product and tuning it to your own preference. The e-cig industry uses a mix of nicotine, vegetable glycerin, and propylene glycol as their starting base, and then they throw in some artificial flavors on top. We're just going to be using a mix of cannabinoids as our starting base and adding in terpenes and flavonoids, all that other good fun stuff. Honestly, all like the chemistry aside, I think this is a lot of fun. And for me, it's where we get the artist part in the job title extraction artist. And before we get started mixing anything, we're going to want to know just how much terpenes to add. The biggest mistake we can make here is assuming that more is better is definitely not. Terpenes are incredibly potent aroma compounds, most of them with some sort of pharmacological activity. Your nose and taste buds can detect these at incredibly low concentrations, talking parts per billion, parts per trillion, and it doesn't take much to completely change the flavor profile, for better or for worse. Real quickly, let's just take it back to organic chem class real quick. Most of these common terpenes are hydrocarbons, while others contain functional groups like alcohols, making them terpenoids. I don't say that to kind of fearmonger. Just remember, when you start pushing these terpene concentrations too high, things can become very overwhelming or just plain harsh, and really quickly too. This is definitely one of the cases of more chemistry doesn't always mean better chemistry. Personally, I like to end up somewhere around 4 to 6% total terpene content, but you definitely got to watch out. Up around 6, 7%, you can start getting some noticeable throat hit and harshness starting to form. And that's where the tricky part is. Your concentrate probably already has some terpenes from the original extraction. And unless you have laboratory data telling you exactly what's there, we're going to be estimating. Even then, without perfectly controlled storage parameters, the extract's going to experience some degree of degradation, which will change the numbers that are reported on the COA. So if the lab said it had 3% terpenes, that might not always be the case. We don't have to worry about hitting an exact number. We can always add more if it's not enough. So it's best to undershoot and try again if needed. Just remember that removing too much terpenes is kind of a harder process, though not impossible. So don't worry if you mess it up. Remember, we're chemists here, and even if it's home chemistry, chemistry can fix a lot of things. Now, I normally see budget extracts having terp percentages right around 2 to 3% if you need to use that as an estimate, like what we'll be doing here since the brand I bought didn't provide it in their COAs. I did make a calculator though to help me know just how much terps to add, and you can use this too. I'll throw a link in the description. Just know it's not required. All right, what I'm going to do is take this weigh boat because the scale that I have set up is super sensitive. It only goes up to 20 grams. Unfortunately, this jar weighs more than 20 grams, so I wasn't able to get a starting weight, but this is really light. So we're going to scoop out all the extracts into this. That's what we'll do our mixing and scoop it back into the jar. It's not ideal, but work with what you got. All right, so we have 2.037 here. We're going to enter that into the calculator for the crude weight. And I'm just going to guess that there was 2% terps in here, which is low, but there was really like no scent on this at all. I'm going to target 5%. We can always go up from there if needed. And we can see here, we're only going to be adding 0.0643 grams. My scale only has 3 decimals, so I'm going to be shooting for that 0.064-ish range. Obviously, not going to want to go too much over that, or else we're going to be pushing that target terpenes by too much. I do have a feature here of what I end up with, and we can put in what we actually added. That will tell us our true final terpene percentage. You could put in your COA for the cannabinoids if you really wanted to get nitty and gritty with it. I have a little calculator here that shows you, for example, I paid $4 for a gram of this not so good stuff. Top shelf around us, about 30, 40 bucks. And our terpene price from Abstracts, $20 for a 2.3 mil bottle, gives us about 90% cheaper going this way compared to top shelf. So as long as our mixing process turns out good, might be a cost-effective way to make some good extracts. Now what I'm going to do, because I can't put this jar on the scale, it weighs too much, I'm going to have to resort to mixing my terpenes in this weigh boat. I could either directly mix the terpenes and concentrates together in here, then scoop it back. But what I think I'm going to do is try to push this extract together and make like a bed. That'll catch the terpenes, because with only adding 0.06 grams, that's like a drop, maybe 2 drops at most. We should be able to transfer this extract back into the jar and then mix it up and distribute those 1 or 2 drops of terpenes without maybe smearing or losing some to the weigh boat, if that makes any sense. I should also mention real quick, you don't just have to add terpenes. I've got a couple other bottles here. This jar contains THCA diamonds. I like to keep this on hand. If I do add too much terpenes, we can dilute it down with more starting extract. In this case, we don't have any more of this concentrate, but we do have flavorless THCA diamonds. Alternatively, you could always buy just regular THCA diamonds and flavor it with the terpenes you want, and you'll be getting a super pure product because it's not going to have any of the pigments or lipids and waxes that come with either cured resin or live resin. So that's an alternative way that I really like to play around with from time to time for getting like a almost pharmaceutical type extract that's based on true formulations chemistry. Right here is some CBD. Here's some CBC. I don't know. I've never personally tried adding CBC, but it is a minor cannabinoid, so maybe I should try that in the future. I have added CBG. You do see this a lot in like hemp strain extracts. And CBG has some pretty interesting properties I wanted to test out. So a while back, I picked up some CBG and mixed that into some extracts. It was cool, but I definitely need to play around with the dosages. And then here's some THCV diamonds. If you wanted to mix in minor cannabinoids to really fine tune that buzz or the effect you get, by all means, now's the time to do it. Anyways, I'm not going to be adding any of those into this mix. I'm just going to be adding terpenes. Now it's time to choose what terpenes to add. So let's see what we got here. This right here is a bottle of blue raspberry cloudbusters by Abstracts. If we wanted to add more of a blue raspberry taste, that actually might be interesting. I've got 6 of their native strains to test out. This would be like if we wanted to mimic a actual cannabis strain. And I should mention these are all from Abstracts. Shout out Abstracts for sending me these terps. It's not a sponsored video necessarily by them, but I should be completely clear and open. They did send out these all for free. So while it's not sponsored and I'm not getting paid to do this in spirit of transparency, anyways, so I've got papaya, blackberry kush, Ghost Train Haze, Cherry Pie. One of my personal favorites is the Super Sour Diesel. And then we've got King Louis the 13th. Over here, I've got the individual terpenes. So if you wanted to play around with individual terps instead of something like this, which is going to be a blend of terpenes and flavonoids and all that other good stuff, you could go that route. So beta carotene, D-limonene, beta myrcene, alpha pinene, terpinolene, linalool, and this is actually one that I call my Sleepy Mix V1. It was essentially mixing a couple of what the terps that we're going to see here soon um, with some of these other isolated terps. And my thought was, is because like obviously if you wanted to do a blend or a couple different terpenes, it's really hard with the small amount of volume that we're working with. If I had 100 grams of starting concentrate and those numbers were like 1 or 2 milliliters of terps that I was adding, it might be different. But what we can do here is add them all to this vial, basically creating a stock solution. And then say I needed to add 0.06 mils, which would be like a drop. I could just pull from this stock solution that I created. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if this is something that you're going to want to pursue more. What I do want to play with today is going to be in their new AI effects line, which is this right here. Got a couple of different ones to pick from. We've got relaxed, peaceful, energized, focused, and inspired. And I really like this box that they send it out in. This was done based on some research that I don't know if they put it out already or if it's just in a white paper. I'll certainly leave links to all those down in the description. But they essentially recruited a bunch of people, gave them a bunch of terps, and try to see what terps did what. From there, they put it into their AI and had it find correlations or potential relationships and came up with these blends for the optimized effects. So right now I'm in the process of going through a move. I'm like drained on energy. I hope it's not showing in this video. I think I want to do their energized blend. So we'll see if this actually keeps me energized throughout the next coming days as we move back down to the Ann Arbor area. But what we're going to want to do is just shake this up. Normally, I would go ahead and tear my scale. In this case, it auto shut off on me, but that's just so that I can see how much terpenes have been added instead of having to do the math in my head. Now I'm going to take a glass pipette and we're just going to pull up a tiny bit of it and just slowly add it to the top of this extract. So we got 0.7 or sorry, 0.070. It was about 3.5, 4 drops. All right. And we can see a little wet spot where those terpenes are. We're just going to go ahead and kind of fold this extract over top of each other, chop it up, and just keep mixing it. All right. And I know I didn't do a great job of showing the concentrate beforehand, but it did go from more of a sugar wax to slightly looser and more liquidy. I wouldn't call it a sauce by any means, but it did get a little bit, I don't know, I guess just looser is the way to put it. It went from more of a sugar, kind of thicker diamond crystal to a sand, and is a little bit moldable. But there we go. I go ahead and squirt the rest of that back in there. I'll clean this off with isopropyl alcohol. Go ahead and cap this up. I do highly recommend keeping these in the fridge when you're not using them. Right now, I don't have AC and it's about 82 degrees in this house. So I want to try and keep these exposed to that warmer air as little as possible because even at this 80-degree temperature that they're in right now, that's high enough to start volatilization. So I might actually go and put these in real quick. So let's go over to this concentrate calculator now and see what we actually did end up with. We added 0.070 right on the dot. That gives us a terp percentage of 5.3%. So not bad actually. And that would put this at 90% cheaper than top shelf wax. Now, what would happen if you accidentally fat fingered that and maybe went up to 0.1? 6%, you're still good. What about 0.2? 10.8%. Uh-oh. We're a little bit high there. That's definitely going to be harsh and I don't want to say potentially harmful because I don't know that for facts, but I wouldn't want to dab that, I'll be honest, just based off of my experience. This is where it would be advantageous to either add some THCA crystals or just add some more of that starting concentrate back in. Maybe that brings our crude weight up to now 3.03 and say maybe we have a half gram of CBD laying around. Now that brings us up to 7.2% terps. All I'm trying to say here is you're going to want to dilute if you add too much. Now, if you don't happen to have any extra extracts laying around, that's totally fine too. You could use heat. Like I said, these terpenes like to off gas and degrade at really low temperatures. Keeping it in like 90, 100-degree oven for a couple minutes is all you need. If you do happen to have a vac oven laying around, well, that's probably your best bet. And that's what we would do in the industry to kind of remedy something like this. But just goes to show that we can fix things if we go a little too far. Personally, I'd rather just spend an extra minute adding another milligram than spending an hour trying to undo adding too much. But just try to remember that less is more when adding these terpenes. And also remember, this isn't about covering up bad concentrates and trying to pass it off as fire. Trust me, as someone who's ran a few extraction labs in the past, but more importantly, someone who just loves consuming concentrates, I fully understand that you get what you pay for in this industry. And I know not to expect too much from a $4 per gram batter or sugar, but that doesn't mean that we have to settle. And it's not about pretending budget extracts are something they're not. Think about it like seasoning a steak. Salt can absolutely make a steak taste better, but it can't really turn hamburger into Wagyu. This is kind of the same idea. For just a few dollars of terpenes and a couple minutes of time, you can really customize your concentrate experience to better match your own preferences, whether it's adding some gassy terpenes or some bubblegum e-juice flavoring. Honestly, I think it's one of the coolest parts of cannabis chemistry. And as us chemists like to joke, better living through chemistry. Now, if you enjoyed this and want more videos where I break down the science behind cannabis in a practical way, please let me know what you want to see next. Until then, happy experimenting, and I'll see you on the next one.